Welcome to the Grimfrost Podcast. Today's guest is Peter Olausson, Associate History Professor at Karlstad University and expert in the cultural heritage of Värmland, Sweden. So, welcome to the Grimfrost Longhouse. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's been a while since we met last time. It's like 10 years ago or something.
Well, we have seen each other from time to time.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
About 10 years, yes, first time.
Yeah. So you are our first local guest, actually.
Okay.
From Värmland, where we are in that part of Sweden that where we are right now.
Yeah.
So it's great to have like a local connection. So you are like the history of Värmland is one of your specialities.
Yeah. That's correct. I've spent many hours of digging into it.
Yeah, but we wanted to start somewhere else because you are one of the founders of Viking Age, the Viking village in Nysäter, a few. Like in half an hour from Karlstad, where we are right now?
Yeah. If you're speedy, yes.
But 45 minutes.
A little bit, 40 minutes or so. Yeah.
So it's a Viking society that we here at Grimfrost have worked with a lot. When did this start? The whole.
Well, the association Föreningen Viking Age, that was in 1993, so that's a while.
It's quite early, I would say, isn't it?
Yeah, well, as you know, the 90s it was many Viking arrangements and shipbuildings and so on, and we were one of these associations that were started then. So 93, and then we started with the building of the ship in 95.
Yeah, so. Like how did the whole thing come about? When did you why?
Well, for us, like in most cases, I would say it's just a couple of people getting together, and we would like to build a Viking ship, and for this part of Värmland and these waters, and we were three, 4, 5 people all together. And then we had meetings, of course, with local people and local politicians and so on to get support. And then,
So did it take a lot of funding then from...
Yeah, well, not to start the association, but to get the shipbuilding. Oh, yes. A lot of work before we had the funding to be able to start.
Yeah. And today you actually have like a visitor center with a museum and a Viking village there as well. So how did that, where did the idea to come from to build that?
Yeah, well, all started with the ship. And when we had the ship, we needed the equipment to the ship and for all people. And where we had that, people who attended wanted some place to stay. So they started to build their own houses. And from one house to another house, and now we have a small village. Yeah.
So, how did people come to this place? Because now it's quite a big association, isn't it?
Well, we have about 200 people as members.
Yeah.
Something like that. But they are rather scattered over Sweden, and some of them are also abroad.
Yeah.
So we are not so many who actually live in the neighborhood any longer.
Okay. Yeah. So, but it used to be more local.
Yeah, from the beginning.
Yeah.
But people get older and so on. So some of those have become too old to attend, or they are in Valhalla.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I guess getting old is inevitable, but growing up is optional.
Right? Yeah. That's right. But we're about 200, and that means that from time to time, people come to us and stay for some days or so, and especially at the Viking market.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the village, though? I mean, the houses. Because I've been there. It's a really nice place, and if you want to see the place you can look at some of the Grimfrost videos that we have online, where we've done a lot of filming in this location. So just check it out. It's pretty cool place. But yeah.
Yeah, well, there are about 15 houses right now, and most of them are very small, just for a family, you can say. And they're built to, be like a small village that wasn't really whole year village.
Oh, okay.
Just for visitors.
I see.
I mean, that's the plan of it. If we had a real Viking village, as you know, I mean, we had a barn, or we had animals all over, and we had a long house and so on. We don't have that. But so therefore, most of them are small, and they are for visits over a weekend or something like that.
But if I remember correctly, you also have a couple of occasions where a lot of people come to this area with tents, and so it actually builds up into a proper, almost like a Viking city.
Yeah, that's right. We have the annual Viking market.
Yeah.
Last weekend in July every year.
Okay.
And I guess about 200 visiting Vikings and so on for that weekend, and about 3,000 visitors. So
on annual basis, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
because I mean it's quite a remote place, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, in Nysäter, which is the society around, it's about 300 people living there. So 3,000 visitors, it's a lot.
It's a tenfold increase.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we should talk about the ship. I mean, actually, you know what? Let's do this. Do you have any future plans for the village and for the Viking? Because you also have a museum there, right?
Yeah, we also have a museum. That's right, and we've had that for about 15 years or so. So, our plans is actually based on how people who are involved in this want to develop it, building more houses and so on.
Yeah.
We have had plans for a long house. I don't think that we can realize that, not in the short term anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember you talking about that like a few years back.
Yeah, we did. But if there are people around, people are listening and so on, that we would like to contribute with the building. Yeah, please take a contact with, and we'll see.
Yeah.
We have the area in itself, and we have the certificate to build. So.
Oh, okay. So
it's only funding and people.
Yeah. Well, funding can always be a bit of a trick.
Yeah, it can be.
So, do you think that the county of Värmland or the region of Värmland or something would chip in for something like that? If it would be.
Well,
I mean, you applied for some grants for the building of the ship.
Oh yes, we did, and also for the building of the Viking Museum.
Yeah.
So we have got good support, I would say, from the region and from the community and the EU funding from time to time as well. It's not impossible that that could be done also in the future. I do know personally that it's an effort to actually apply.
A lot of red tape.
It is. But might be.
Fingers crossed then for a long house.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the museum. What's the emphasis on that? Is it like the Viking Age itself, or is it the village, or is it the ship? Because I mean, obviously the ship is a big part of it.
Yeah, well, it's the Viking Age in itself and as a whole, I would say. I mean, the main part of the museum is the old exhibit from York. Yeah, from the Jorvik Viking Center there that we sort of inherited.
Okay.
Yeah, and from that was the building of that museum. So that shows, a city around 900 or something like that in York. But even if York was just one of the cities that were there during the Viking Age, so we don't say that this is York. We say that it can be Ribe, it can be Birka, etc. But that's the main part, and then we have other parts that is about mythology, a little bit about weapons during the Viking Age. And about the shipbuilding, yes, and the ship adventures as well.
Because the ship is very very special. I mean, I've seen it. It's a beautiful Viking ship. What can you?
I agree.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the ship?
Well, the ship is it's the Skulder 5. I mean, from the Roskilde Fjord. That's the type of it. And we got good help from the museum in Roskilde when we were starting to build it.
Okay, how did they help out? Did they have like blueprints?
Yeah, they had blueprints actually. Yeah. So we got a copy of that, and we also had one person from them who went up to us and said that, well, do like this when you're doing your planks and so on.
Yeah,
he helped us to start.
Yeah.
And that was, of course, very important for us.
Yeah.
But from that, it was local people and people in the association that built it. Yeah.
Because from what I understand, building it was you did it quite differently than most went about building Viking ships at that time, at least.
Well, we tried to build it as close to the tradition, so to say.
Yeah.
We did our own tools, axes and so on in a little smittery. And yeah, we did that to use. I mean, it's not 100% traditional, but as close as possible.
Yeah, but I was amazed because you actually studied just how to make the tools in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And then you made them. Like, did you make them in place?
Yeah, we did that in place. So that was the first part of the process, was to build the small smittery.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we had good handicraft people with that skill that could do that.
Yeah.
But that was the first part.
So how do you learn how to craft tools? That are essentially are 1,000 years old, basically.
Yeah, but the technique being a smith hasn't changed so much during 1,000 years. So it's in the hands for a good smith of today. And of course, studies of the old tools that are preserved in museums and so on, and how they looked.
Yeah, and they found this amazing tool chest, I know.
Yes.
Can see at the historical museums.
Mästermyr, that's right.
It's an amazing tool chest. I've seen it. It's so fascinating to see it. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So was that also a source for you when you were looking into building the tools to see what was in this tool chest?
Yes. That was one of the information places, so to say, to look into that and other findings in the museums here in Karlstad as well.
Yeah. So, you started by making the tools. What was the next step then? You have the tools. Now you need to do what?
Well, then we needed to start building, and that was to find a keel. The oak to make a keel of. That was the next step, and that was a tricky one for us.
That must have been tricky in so many ways, because as far as I know, oak trees are protected in Sweden. You're not allowed to cut them down, not even if they're on your own property.
Well, we had one donated actually in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And that was when we were cutting it down and so on, a lot of people around, and it was happening,
really?
Filming and so on about that. But it was a failure. When we started to actually do that keel, it was one spot that was too weak for that proposed keel. So we had to start over again, and the solution was done in Denmark. We got another one from an oak that they cut it down north of Copenhagen and transported to us. Perhaps they did it some dark night in Denmark. I don't know, but anyway, we got it and we were happy for that.
I think in Sweden you are allowed to cut oaks down, but you need to permit to do it. Like you need to because it's really weird somehow. But I know, for instance, like they had this big oak field at the Viking Age in Vättern, which they planted like in the 1600s for future warships.
Yeah.
And the Swedish Admiralty got a letter like a few years ago saying your oak trees are ready now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They have been protected from the 1600s, and it was for that purpose that these were for the royal ships, the naval forces.
Yeah.
So when a forest burnt down for some reason, and one oak was missing in that fire, you have to pay for that.
That is crazy. But I guess, yeah. So you finally found the keel.
Yeah, we did.
And I happen to know that there's something special with how you went about securing the wood for what do you call it, the boarding, or what do you call it, the planks along the ship?
The planks. Well, you have to have them wet to keep them in so you can actually form the whole ship for it.
Yeah.
So that was also a tricky part to do that all the time.
Because I seem to recall that somebody told me that you actually didn't. There's not a single plank on that ship that has been sawed. It's all split wood, isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
So what was the tricky part with that? Because that must be a
hard work.
Yeah.
Hard work for many people to do it, of course, and then when you go into something like that, you don't really know how the inner part is, and you have to get the core of it out, so to say, for that the wet part that is so weak. So it was a lot of axing, axing work for that.
Yeah. But what's the benefit of having split wood instead of sawed wood? Like, why?
Well, it has to do with the strength of it, the fiber strength, that you keep that and you don't break the fibers if you can avoid it. And if doing that, you can also get the ship as light as possible.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because you can have thinner planks?
Yeah, thinner planks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. So we did it that way.
That's really impressive. Well, it must be a certain skill to find the right trees for that as well.
Yeah, well, that was also, of course, a lot of searching the forest around, and well, they have to be of a certain strength and a certain age. So we got some that was about 200, 250 years old, and they were donated to us, and we could transport it and work with that.
But that was an oak, right?
No, that was not oak. It was...
Is it pine trees?
Yeah, well, pine,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, they're quite tall. That would be long planks. Yeah. So now you got your planks and everything, but what else can you tell us about like putting the ship together? What was the major challenges really? Because it must have been a lot of stuff that where you're going, oh, we're going ahead fine now, and then all of a sudden, damn it, we didn't think about this. We have to go back and.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I remember all the moments of that, but yes, it was a lot of fuss about that process. It took 3 years altogether.
Oh, 3 years.
3 years.
That's
That was actually what we had thought. 3 years.
Okay.
But a lot of troubles during this road to go, so to say. I mean, when you got the planks, you have to get them in the right position on the ship, and that is also something that you don't know in this. You don't know the puzzle from the beginning, so you have to try. And we can't use that part. Perhaps on the other side or so. Yeah. So that was trial and error.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So 3 years. How did it feel when you finally managed to actually put the ship in the water? What was the feeling like?
Oh yeah. Well, that was a day.
Was it? Were you nervous?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And it was a lot of people in Nysäter, and they took betting and so on. Will it sink directly or will it go? And they actually put me first in the ship.
Oh, really?
I was chairman. Okay. So, I was to blame if it wasn't succeeding, of course. Yeah, but it went very well. But afterwards, we could also see that the benches that we had, when the ship was in water, of course, that changed the form of the ship in itself. But the benches didn't do that. So there was we had to adopt and actually do more benches that we can fit in the inner part of the ship after a while.
So how did it change? Did it shift
they
position?
They shrinked.
Oh, they shrunk.
Yeah,
Oh.
or you can say that they were stabilized, but the other part, the outer part of the ship.
It moved over the water pressure.
Yeah.
Plus also the planks get wet. And
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was one effect. During the first season, that had to be changed in a way also.
Yeah. So how was the first sailing then?
At first it was rowing.
Yeah.
And I guess the first sailing, that was perhaps a month later or something like that.
It's got to be an experience. Did any of you have any experience sailing a Viking ship? Because that in itself can be very, very challenging. It's not like any old boat.
No,
really.
that's right. We had sailors that formed the crew in itself. And they had contact with some other associations around in Norway and Denmark and in Sweden, which had seminars about sailing and rowing that type of ships. And that was very valuable.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And for example, down in Roskilde, gatherings there and trying the ships that they had there. Yeah.
But and they have I think in Roskilde they have a very long one, don't they? Like an ocean-going Viking ship as well.
Yeah, that was built a little bit later on.
Oh, it was later.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right. But that's the 36 meters. I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've been with this ship in many places. What kind of trips did you make with it?
Well, the main trip. The legendary trip for us is the trip to Canada, to Newfoundland. Yeah. And that's not over the Atlantic on keel, no. But being part of the celebration, 1,000-year celebration of the exploration of North America, Leif Erikson and all that. I mean, we were part of that. And,
that must have been amazing.
Yeah, it was. And I got the call from the Canadians. Let's see, that was, our ship had been concluded in 98, and it was late 98 that I got that call. Would you like to be part of it? So we were very fresh. Yeah, and then it took a year, a bit more than a year, with the planning and so on, and together with the other ships that went with that expedition.
How many Viking ships were there?
I think we were 13 altogether. 5 from Sweden, 1 from Norway. Yeah. And 1 from Holland, and then there were American and Canadian ones.
Okay.
Yeah, and Icelandic.
But no Danish?
No, they
weird.
didn't dare to go. I would say not dare, but they have regulations in Denmark where it said that they shouldn't leave the Danish coastline. And that's the reason at
no
that time anyway. Yeah.
Danes, they're crazy.
Yeah, well, perhaps it was we that were crazy that went along. I don't know, but
You don't know.
but still, we were there, and it was fantastic.
That's good fun.
Yeah.
I can imagine. So, the name of the ship, I always find it's a great name for a ship. First of all,
Yeah.
but
it is.
you have to tell the listeners and the audience like the name of the ship and the meaning behind it.
Yeah, it's called Glad av Gillberga, and or in English, glad, if you like. It's the same word, and that has some different explanations. We are in a system of a river and a sea, or a lake, and that lake is called Glafsfjorden, and the old name for that lake is Gladsfjord, meaning glittering water, you can say about that. So that's one reason. And the other one is the connection to the Asa gods, that one of the horses that are mentioned in the Edda is Glad, one of the sun horses. So we thought that, well, this will do for us.
And it's perfect as well because it's one of the sun horses, because everybody knows about the sun in Karlstad, which is where we are right now.
Yeah, you're right.
Great for that reason too. That's a different story. We don't have to go into that, but it's a saying we have in Sweden.
Yeah.
So, but and obviously then you don't have a dragon's head as well, right? On the ship.
Yeah, well, we have one. And,
you have a dragon's head?
Yeah, we have one.
Oh.
And, well, that's a story as well. I mean, in the last part of the building of the ship, we needed a dragon head. And we didn't really knew at that time how will we be able to get the dragon head that is representing us. And then came along a girl that was, what do you call it? A carpenter apprentice, I would say. She was walking along and or hitchhiking, and she wanted something to do on her education. So she came to us. She was there for a couple of months, and she did the dragon head, which is the head of the horse Glad.
Exactly, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah,
it's not like a fearsome beast; it's a horse, and
it's a horse. Yes,
it's beautiful work.
Yeah, but I would say that, well, horse and dragon, are they not a little bit connected?
I guess they are in a way.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a horse. You can say it's a horse, but it's also a good horse.
Well, that's pretty cool. And it's a beautiful ship. And again, if you want to see it, it features in many Grenfrost videos. And like if you ever come to Sweden or if you live close by, I definitely think you should visit the Viking Center there in Nysäter to look at the ship and everything there. So now, moving on a little bit, you're an expert on local history here in Värmland, which is, as we already mentioned, is a Swedish province. What Viking history do we have in these parts of Sweden?
Well, there is a discussion, as you know, of course, about, well, how to define Vikings. And we don't have any sources that actually tell that there are Viking boats going out, or ships going out from Värmland and to England or anywhere else. And that's quite natural. We were in the inner part of Sweden. But we have lakes, we have our rivers and so on. Of course, people during the Viking Age, they have used ships as well. And as our definition of Vikings is that, well, everybody living during the Viking Age in the Nordic countries could also be defined as Vikings. And in that definition, of course, we had a population in Värmland during these ages, and there are some remnants that are found, but mostly I would say grave mounds from the Viking Age.
Yeah, because I think it's quite interesting, because when you look at Sweden today, as you say, Värmland is like in the middle of Sweden. It's you don't have any ocean. We have the big lake, Vänir. But one thing that I find really interesting and that you don't really think about sometimes is the land elevation that's happened for over like 1,000 years. And that's actually almost 10 meters difference now.
Yeah.
Which also affects the rivers and the streams. Some of the streams we have today, there are like no more than streams, may have been like big rivers back in the day that you can actually sail on. So it would have been possible.
Yeah, but it's more of a fluctuation in that way in the eastern part of Sweden.
Oh, really? Okay,
I mean the Lake Mälaren and around in Uppland, which are very prominent in that way, and also up north.
Oh, yeah.
That have really changed the landscape. Of course, there have been differences here as well, but not so dramatic during 1,000 years.
Yeah, because there is a water, I don't know what you call it, like a water division that goes like in the middle of Sweden, almost close to where I live. Where you have like the Baltic side, and you have the West Ocean side, and it's like at the Kiel Mountain, the Kilsbergen.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that you say that. I didn't actually know that. So like grave mounds and stuff like that. But are there any famous local Vikings from these parts of Sweden?
Well, the people from Värmland mentioned in the sagas, like in Hemska England, on, of course, connected to the Norwegian history from them. Like Åke Bond is one of them, and in Egil, the saga of Egil Skallagrimson, one of his adventures is when he and his people go to Värmland.
Yeah,
one of the most dangerous places that he ever visited in his whole life. It's a great story, actually.
I love that saga. Yeah, it's my favorite story.
Yeah. And there are places in Värmland mentioned, and there are some people also mentioned. The first woman from Värmland is mentioned there. I think her name is Tora. In the western part of Värmland.
Okay, it rings a bell somewhere. Yeah.
And then of course in the saga of Olaf the Holy, it's also mentioned his travels through Värmland when he was a refugee or going over to the realm of Kiev and so on. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So no famous battles or anything going on in this part?
If you go to the tourist brochures, you can see a mention of a battle in the western part, actually at our lake Glafsfjorden. But that's mythology.
Really?
Yeah, they've actually there are people mentioned in that saga that would one king and one other here and so on. But if you really read that saga, it's all about Sognefjord in Norway. And it's misinterpreted a long time ago, and then they have used it in Glafsfjorden. So we actually we can't contribute that. But it says in the tourist brochures and so on that it was so fierce that the blood from all the dead people went all the way from Glafsfjorden and the lakes down to Lake Venir. So it was all red. Great story in itself, but not true.
Oh,
no.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
you can't get everything.
No.
So, I mean, you're an expert on Värmland, and what can you tell us? What does it mean to be a Värmlänning? Then, I mean, you said already that Egil said it was like the most dangerous part of the world he's ever been in. But like, what does it mean to be a Värmlänning?
Well, I do think that you know the answer of that. That being a Värmlänning, you're good to tell stories and to perhaps making things 10 times bigger than they are in reality, and so on. But that's a good thing.
I always felt that the people from Värmland are very like good-humored people.
Yes, I agree. I have my relatives here and old kin back and so on, but I'm raised on the West Coast, and good people in the West Coast areas. But I enjoy life in Värmland, and you can get a good story told from sort of every day if you speak with people living here.
Yeah,
yeah.
So how long have you? When did you move back? If I may say so.
Well, permanently it's about 40 years now.
Oh, so you?
Yeah. I'm really.
You're almost as much Värmlänning as you can get then by this point.
Yeah, I hope I'm. that they can see me as a Värmlänning nowadays.
So, but can you say that there's a specific identity of being a Värmlänning?
It's a hard one. I mean, the history of Värmland from at least the 1600s and onwards has been the history of iron factories and about forest industry and those parts of society. So of course that's something that has formed the identity. So parts.
Is that like how far back you can trace like a Värmländsk identity?
I would say so. I mean, people moved into Värmland during that area and onwards. So it was an increasing of the population that was quite dramatic. And of course that meant that you had a sort of a new society that was formed during these ages.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that people moved in to Värmland, because we kind of wanted to go into this, but you received an honorary award for your contributions to genealogy, which is, I mean, it's really popular today. Why do you think it is so popular now with genealogy?
Well, I do think that, people are educated in a way that they haven't been before. They have the possibilities to reach the archives, archival documentation, and doing that by the web page that and by web page that. That's the possibilities. And then I do think that people are interested in their own story, in their own background. Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as back as you can go. Yeah.
And is it true that Sweden is one of the countries where you can research your roots the furthest back?
Yeah, that's true actually. I mean, Sweden and Finland, I would say that we have the best documentation for ordinary people. It starts in the era of Gustavus Vasa, 1500s and onwards. and we haven't been in warfare in that way that our own countries have been invaded. So therefore, the archives are still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't Iceland also have like a?
They have also a lot of documentation.
Yeah.
Yes. And what they have is the medieval documents that we don't have in that amount anyway.
Yeah.
And all genealogies that are in these documents from Iceland.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it's kind of striking, and I was wondering if it's only like the easily the fact that it's more easily accessible today, all the archives and everything. Obviously that's going to help, but I'm kind of thinking that we're living in this fast-paced society with like everything just rushing by so fast, so much information that we kind of lose ourselves. And I think we did a podcast with Einar Selvik, if you know who he is, the main man from the band Vardruna. And he had a really interesting saying. He said, like, a rootless tree will fall. And I thought that was a really interesting take on it, because I feel that sometimes maybe people today are losing their roots, and they kind of need to find that connection to their past. Would you say that could be a possibility?
Yeah, I do agree. I do think, I'm a lecturer in history, and I can see in my students that they are eager to know, and if you speak about their own history, well, it's glittering eyes and so on. I do think that it's a need to know something about who am I, what are my roots, my ancestors, what parts of the world do I have a connection with, and all that. So yes, yeah.
So yeah, you said like in Sweden, you say it's really like the 1500s. You can trace it back, right?
Yeah, for most ordinary people, yes, you can do that.
And even further, if you happen to have like a royal bloodline, I guess.
Yeah, royal and the nobility. Yes, you can perhaps come down to the 1200s for nobility, and royal lines. Well, Viking Age. Yeah,
that's very interesting, actually. So, I mean, you've researched in a lot about this, but you also, which I think will interest a lot of our viewers, anyways, because we have a lot of viewers from around the world, and especially North America. And you researched and written a lot about the Swedish emigration during the 19th century to North America. So what can you tell us about this emigration? Because it's kind of a fascinating part of Swedish history where we lose half our population almost, right?
Yeah, well, it's about 1.3 million, I would say, during the period from 1850 to 1930. So that's a lot. Yeah. Well, it has a prehistory. The first emigration wave in a smaller scale, it's already in the 1600s to Delaware and to the colony of New Sweden. That's an interesting part, and I've written a little bit about that. Yeah. I mean that was after the colony, the settlers were still there, and the Swedish churches and the Swedish language and so on. It's sort of flourished during the coming generations. So and there is something that is called Swedish Colonial Society in Philadelphia today that dig into that story. But then the major emigration starts about 1850 from Sweden. So depending on poverty, depending on the good future that I could see or hoped for on the other side of the Atlantic. Yeah.
Because I always find it a little bit ironic, in a way, that they moved all the way across Atlantic, and then people from Scandinavia, they were more or less directed to move into like the northern Midwest around Minnesota, which is like Scandinavia. It's like the same kind of.
Yeah, but that was the frontier line at the time. So you can see these different waves of people coming from England or Ireland and so on. Well, they settled in the eastern part, and then it was from other countries. Well, you can live here, you can have a settlement here, and then it moved westwards. Then Minnesota and Wisconsin was similarities to the countries, Sweden and Norway and so on, that they left. So I'm sure that many could adopt rather well there, or we know that they could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you go there, you see Swedish stuff almost everywhere.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
In a place like Lindstrom, for example.
Oh, where they actually speak Swedish still.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
It's crazy. But I kind of wanted to go back to Delaware, because it's one of those things where that we don't really, like, at least I didn't know much about it, because growing up it was always Minnesota, Wisconsin, those areas, right? And then you, like, Delaware, like, and it's very interesting that it was such a strong Swedish presence there, even after the...
Yeah, even after. And if you come to Philadelphia, you can see the main buildings there still can have the Swedish flags or symbols waving there. Yeah.
I'm there quite often. I have to look for that.
Yeah, please do. And you can go to the Glory Day Church. I mean, that's from about 1700s.
Oh, wow.
So go in there and you can feel like, well, I'm back home in Småland or Västergötland or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
Proper
so
Swedish
it's
church.
one of the oldest church buildings in United States.
Oh, wow.
That still stands there.
So why is that part of the immigration history into North America? Why is that so interesting from a historical standpoint?
Well, what should I say? I mean, it's an adventure, of course, and adventures are always interesting in such a way. And then it's the perspective from Sweden, that Sweden as a small country actually had that ambitions in the 1600s, that they wanted the colony, and they went over the Atlantic to do this settlement. So it was a part of the sort of magnificent thoughts and plans and politics during the 1600s. Sweden had also a smaller colony in West Africa for a small small time.
That's
also.
right.
So I mean that's quite interesting. Sweden did as many other West European countries at the time, but we were a land with colonial ambitions.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the people that went there, not so few of them actually came from our province. I mean, they were the forest Finns. They were experts on going into to wilderness and making a settlement.
Yeah, and we had quite a few of those.
Yes, we had.
Yeah. So, we talked about all that stuff now, but kind of drifting away a little bit, but it's still kind of interesting. So you've written about Sweden's history, like in general as well, right? From ancient Sweden to nowadays, basically the development of Sweden as a nation. Am I correct?
I have more specialized in Värmland. I have written something that is from examples from the rest part of Sweden as well. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, which are the three moments in history? Maybe both. Let's do this. The three moments in history that have been the most decisive for Sweden as a country, but also for Värmland.
Oh,
or three for Sweden, three for Värmland.
Oh, yeah. We normally say as historians that for Sweden there are three parts of history that actually forms Sweden as a nation, and the first one is the Viking Age. I mean, that's when both Sweden and Denmark and Norway became kingdoms with a history in history. And then it's the 1200s, and that's the Bjälboätten, Folkunga, etc. That part, where they started with cities, formed cities, Stockholm, and the eastern politics towards Finland, and building of places like strongholds, Örebro, Kalmar, etc. So that's one part, and the laws that they formed. And the third one is the epoch of Gustav Vasa, 1500s, Reformation, and the collection of the land from the church and into the power of the king.
Yeah.
3 formative periods, I would say.
And nothing much has happened since then.
Of course it has.
Yeah, no,
of course it has.
Yeah,
but
I get you. Yeah. So how about Värmland then? As a you like, I guess one of them would be the thing you mentioned before, where the massive increase of population.
Yeah, 1600s.
Yeah.
And the iron factory development here, with hundreds of small factories all over, and the influx of people during that time, that actually changed Värmland quite a lot.
Yeah.
And after that, I would say the 1800s, and that's the emigration, but also the industrialization with other sectors, the paper industry that came, and the forest industry in itself, but then the paper as the development. That's also very important.
And it's still very big here.
It's still very big.
Yeah.
And to add that, the epoch after World War II for Värmland has been very formative also. And it's not, I mean, that's development. And then we have a decline in population and perhaps development during the last decades. But the decades from World War II and until about 1970s has been very successful for Värmland.
Yeah. It's a beautiful part of the country, and I always love coming here. So, all right. So, back to Vikings, because that's what we're kind of about. It was kind of a digression. I'm a big history buff in general, though, and I like the history of Sweden, so I really enjoy talking about that stuff. But just maybe like, all right, on a personal level, what sparked your interest in the like Vikings, and where did it begin?
Yeah, well. As for many others, it's the Icelandic sagas. It's Snorri Sturluson and all the other authors from that time. I mean, I read that as a child, and I have been reading it all over again and again and again. It's the mythology. It's the Edda. I was so fascinated by that when I was about 10 years old, and it has never ended. I think you can just dig into that part of Viking culture.
So do you have any special saga that is like the best, the most fascinating?
Well, of course the Njala.
The Njala.
Yeah, it's fantastic, I would say. And then the short stories also, that the Tåtar. Many of those are real great, but the Njala.
The Njala is amazing. I have to admit, though, I didn't make it through the Njala until the 3rd attempt.
Aha, okay.
Yeah. And then I loved it.
Yeah.
But because one thing that really threw me off about it was all the footnotes with all the names.
Yeah.
And I until I decided, well, do I need to read this? I said, no, I don't. I just discarded it.
Oh, okay.
And then it became a lot easier.
Yeah, of course. And then you can go back if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But It's a fascinating story. It's a very rich story.
It is.
Yeah.
At one point, as a part of our events in the association, we had a man who was reading part of the Njala for us for about 5 hours or so, and that was outside, and it was at one of the grave mounds in our area. So that was one of the really highlights for me.
Yeah,
listening to him.
That is right, because at New Säter, how many grave mounds do you have there? It's like,
well, we have one big one.
Yeah.
And then in the quite neighborhood, I would say it's about 5.
Yeah.
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 And then we have others that are about 10 kilometers in different directions.
Yeah. We talked about grave ones before. It's they're fascinating in their own right. For sure.
Yeah, they are.
So, which aspect of Viking history do you find most interesting then?
Well, I do think that I'm like most boys. It's the adventures. I mean, the explorers that actually went all the way out in the Atlantic and found Iceland and settled there, and then they went on to Greenland and to Vinland and eastward and so on. Those adventures, they are fascinating.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I think that I don't think anybody living today, like almost not back in that day, could imagine sitting in an open ship. On an ocean like the Atlantic, like exposed to weather and wind, and it has to have been brutal.
It has to be been that. I mean, we have experiences of some hours being out in a Viking ship and bad weather and so on. Yeah. And so to have that for days and nights,
it has to put it in some kind of perspective. Because I've only been out in my dad's sailing boat, and like for a few days, and when it's really crappy weather, you just it's not nice.
No, and I thought about that. Well, they must have been very frustrated and angry with the crew members. They're sitting there around and so on. So when they went to land, if they came up fighting and so on, well, that's not.
You kind of. But then again, I guess like if this is what you do, you can also. I think you must understand that you are reliant of each other to make it through, right?
Yeah. I agree with that. But when you go from that, and we made it.
Yeah.
The frustration must come out in some way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Friends or foe.
Yeah, I can imagine that. All right. So, what impact would you say that Vikings had on the Scandinavian history? Because it's a relatively short period of time, actually.
It is, yes.
But they're still so vibrant.
Yeah, and I guess that the impact is greater in other countries. I mean, in France, you hadn't the Normandy if it wasn't for the Viking Age.
That's true. Yeah.
And a lot of the population in Great Britain or Ireland has ancestors that came there during the Viking Age, or in Russia and Ukraine. So the impact during the Viking Age is, from my perspective, more outside Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. But then, of course, it has formed our kingdoms, our realms in itself. But the new cities that came about.
And I always find it fascinating that there are so many traditions that still live on in society that we still have because of the Vikings, like big and small ones actually, like Midsummer's Eve, for instance, and we have like the ham for Christmas, you know.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Christmas,
yeah.
and
Christmas and jul.
Yeah,
I mean,
jul itself.
yeah,
Yeah,
that has the word in itself that it's survived when there is Christmas, like in Christ. Otherwise, I mean, that has survived.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. Like it has never really been forgotten in a way. It's kind of crazy.
No, in a way, but I mean, people have always been staying on about the same place and so on, and well, mom and dad, they did like this, and we do like this, and some of the traditions they are preserved, and you don't really forgot about Odin, even if you went to church. I mean, he was still there.
Yeah. And we know some of the churches are actually built
on the same spot
the same spots as pagan ritual grounds.
Yeah.
So they must have been very vibrant in people's life for a long time.
Yeah,
after.
for a long time. Yeah.
That is, It's kind of interesting how such a short period of time can have that much of an impact, I think. So we're kind of coming to the end of our little conversation here, but we always want to end with a little intriguing question, or actually two questions, but they come in two parts. So, so the first one is this: like, if you could time travel and go back to the Viking Age and be sort of like a fly on the wall, if you want, and witness something during the Viking Age, what would you want to experience or see for yourself from the Viking Age? Is there any specific thing?
Well, if I was to fly on the wall and I wasn't really in danger, so to say, I guess I would like to be there with a vulva, and when she did her ceremonies. That would be very interesting to witness.
So why would that be so interesting to you?
Well, I'm interested in that type of stories, the magic.
Yeah.
I mean, the human magic, and how you do that in different eras. And the vulva, we know so little about her. I would say. So that would be interesting for me.
The vulva sometimes are described as sorceresses, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes just seers, and sometimes they're both.
Sometimes they are both, and who knows?
Yeah.
We really don't know about it, and it can be, of course, different forms of vulva in Iceland and Greenland and in Sweden. So that would be interesting to witness.
Yeah, because they were quite powerful.
Yeah,
they had prominent positions.
Yes, they had.
Or at least according to the legends. Yeah.
We don't know, but I mean, the foundings in, for example, Birka in the graves there, that they have found vulva with a staff, and so. I mean, that says something about the power that she must have had.
Yeah. Because even the gods themselves were kind of afraid of the seers, weren't they? I mean, you have the Valas, the Völuspa.
Yeah. So they must have been important.
Yeah.
So that's. I'm curious about that.
That's a good answer. I like that. So then we come to the real, like, doozy of a question, and would you have wanted to live back in the Viking Age?
I don't think that I have lived so long if I was there during the Viking Age. So, and I enjoy my age and the possibilities to get experience. So I prefer today. Yeah, I would do that.
I'll let you know. Only one person that we've interviewed so far has said yes.
Okay.
Nobody else, because everybody said, like, I enjoy, like, healthcare and like and you know, heated housing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Because you don't want to die from a splinter in your finger.
No. I mean, it's more pleasant to be able to sit here in the studio and speak about the Vikings than actually be there, I guess.
It kind of is, isn't it? But it's a fascinating part of our history, I think, and it's yeah. But I think as a modern person, I mean, obviously, if you were born in that time, you wouldn't know anything else.
No.
So, but like
That's
knowing
right.
what you do today about like the quality of life we have today compared to the way life was back then. I'm totally with you. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was great talking to you and great seeing you again. And I hope we see you at Nysäter soon. And
hope for that.
Best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that bell button.